وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We begin by praising Allah. We praise Him, we seek His aid and assistance, and we beg His forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evils of our own souls and the consequences of our actions. Whomever Allah guides aright, none can misguide, and whomever Allah misguides and leads astray, none can guide aright. I testify that none deserves worship but Allah alone without partner, and I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Allah's final messenger and His most devout and sincere worshipper. The best speech is the speech of Allah Ta'ala, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. And the worst of all things are those that are newly introduced into the religion. Everything newly introduced into the religion is a bid'ah, an innovation. And every innovation in religion is misguidance, and misguidance leads to the fire. So today the title of the talk that I've been asked to give at the Sisters Conference there in Masjid al-Sunnah in Heathrow, London, is the topic of Asbab Ziyadat al-Iman wa Nuqsanihi, or the reasons and causes for the increase and strengthening of Iman, faith, and the causes that weaken or cause the Iman to decrease. The causes for the increase of Iman and its decrease. And this is a really important topic because, as we know, Al-Iman, faith, belief, is the factor, is the thing upon which a person's salvation, a person's success in this life and in the hereafter depends. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. By time, mankind is in loss, except those who believe and do righteous deeds, and who call each other and advise each other to the truth, and who advise each other and call each other to be patient upon the truth. So humankind, if they don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are all in a state of loss. And the only person who is successful in this life and in the hereafter, the only person who will be, or the only type of person who will be admitted into paradise, into the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the one who has Iman, is the one who has correct Iman, faith and belief. And although this is clear and something which every Muslim understands, at least in theory, we also should know that Iman, faith and belief, is clearly defined and explained in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a blessing from Allah azza wa jal, that He has not ordered us, He has not commanded us, and He has not told us to believe, except that He has clarified for us and explained us what we need to do, what we should believe, how we should believe. And likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided us through His revelation, through His kitab, the Quran, and through His messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us also how to develop this Iman, and what are the things that strengthen it and cause it to increase, and what are the things that threaten a person's Iman, a person's faith. What are the things that weaken it? And this is a very important point, that Iman, a person's belief, a person's very faith, can become stronger and it can increase, but it can also become weaker, and it can also decrease until nothing is left and a person has no faith. And this is part of the very creed of the Muslims, the authentic and correct creed, aqidah of the Muslim state, as one of its points, that Iman, faith and belief, consists of beliefs, words and deeds, and it increases with obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it weakens and decreases with disobedience to Allah azza wa jal. And this belief, this creed, is the creed that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught and showed his Sahaba, his companions. It is the correct idea and concept of Iman, of faith, that is found throughout the Quran, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Sunnah of His Messenger alayhi salatu wassalam. And it is what the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, the best people after the Prophets and Messengers, it's what they understood and how they lived. They lived trying to keep their Iman strong and trying to increase it and preserve it and protect it from becoming weak or decreasing. And this correct understanding of Iman, as a Muslim, a person should be very clear as a Muslim that his Iman or her faith is not something which is a vague idea. It is something which is very clear and very defined in terms of what we need and what is required to be a true believer. And this is the ijma', this is the consensus of all the Muslim scholars from the very earliest times, Ahl al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah, those who stick to the Sunnah, those who unite upon the truth, always believed that faith, Iman, is something that consists of belief, speech and actions, and that it increases and decreases. It increases when you obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it decreases and becomes weaker when you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So from the earliest times the scholars explained this based upon what they learnt from the generations of the Salaf, the pious predecessors who went before them, the companions radiyallahu ta'ala anhum themselves understood this, as we will see in a couple of minutes. So the great scholar, one of the early scholars, Al-Imam Abu Ubayd al-Qasim bin Salam rahimahullah, mentions while explaining the creed of the Sunni Muslims and showing us the scholars who preceded him, the hundreds of people, the hundreds of scholars who preceded him, who he had learnt this from and who had passed this down from the generations before them. He said, هذه تسمية من كان يقول الإيمان قول وعمل يزيد وينقص. He said, the following are the names of those who used to say Al-Iman, faith, consists of words and deeds. It increases and it decreases. And then he mentions about 130 names from the people of the scholars who went before him and from the Sahaba, more than 130. And then he said, هؤلاء كلهم يقولون الإيمان قول وعمل يزيد وينقص وهو قول أهل السنة والمعمول به عندنا. He said, all of these people I've mentioned, they all say that Al-Iman, faith, consists of a person's words, his utterances, and as well as his actions, his deeds. And it increases and it decreases. And this is the position of Ahl al-Sunnah. This is the position of the Sunni Muslims. And this is what is acted upon and practiced by us. And likewise the scholars throughout the ages in the books of Aqidah, while explaining the beliefs of the Muslims and defending them against the innovations, the various heresies that were innovated into beliefs, they continue to explain this as a very important point of the aqeedah, the belief of the Muslim. So Imam al-Bukhari, the great Imam and the Amir al-Mu'mineen fil Hadith, the leader of the believers in Hadith, Imam Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he himself said, لقيت أكثر من 1000 رجل من العلماء بالأمصار فما رأيت أحدا يختلف في أن الإيمان قول وعمل ويزيد وينقص. Imam al-Bukhari said, I met more than 1,000 men from the ulama, from the scholars of the various lands, and I did not see any of them differing, disputing over the fact that Iman, faith and belief, consists of words and deeds, and it increases and it decreases. So, without going into too much or too many quotes, this is the creed of Ahlul Sunnah, that a person's faith can increase and it can decrease until nothing is left of it. As some of the great Salaf, Al-Awza'i and others said, when they were asked, does faith increase? Does it decrease? He said, yes, it increases until it is like the mountains, and it can decrease until there is nothing left of it. And so this is the point that we should also take into account here, and this is perhaps the main message of today's talk, and that is that we need to be careful about preserving our Iman, because it can be affected. It is not something that stays fixed all the time, and we should try to be people who protect, preserve and develop our Iman, our faith further, because our success is linked to dying as believers. And we should be worried and concerned about not allowing the Iman to decrease and to become weak until perhaps nothing is left of it. And this reality is something that the Prophet ﷺ himself guided us to and pointed out to us, and he instructed us with regards to this. So in the hadith reported by Al-Hakim and At-Tabarani from the companion Abdullah ibn Amr radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, إن الإيمان لا يخلق في جوف أحدكم كما يخلق الثوب فاسألوا الله أن يجدد الإيمان في قلوبكم. The Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith, and the hadith has been declared sahih, authentic, by scholars like Shaykh Al-Allama Al-Albani rahimahullah. The Prophet ﷺ said, Iman, your faith, gets worn out, it wears out inside of you. Just like the thawb, the garment or the dress that you wear, gets worn out over time. So ask Allah to renew the Iman in your hearts. So this is the reality of people, of human beings, and the reality of faith. And that is that a person's Iman doesn't always stay the same. And it is liable to become worn out and weaker over time if it is not strengthened by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if a person is not guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to try to seek the means, the causes for increasing and strengthening this Iman. The first of which is that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to renew the Iman in our hearts. And this is the reality of deen, of the religion and of faith, and the relationship that people, their souls and their hearts have to their religion. And that is, if a person doesn't take care of his religion, doesn't take care of his Iman, then this Iman can deteriorate. It can be chipped away at if a person forgets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if a person falls into sin, if a person becomes too involved in worldly things in the dunya. Then what happens over time is that if you're not careful and if you don't try to renew and to strengthen your Iman, it becomes weaker and weaker. And it can become weak until a person falls into sin, and a person might continue to fall into sin until the Iman becomes so weak that in fact his whole deen can go. And this analogy or this example of the garment, of the cloth that a person wears and how it wears out after time, also holds true about leaving the religion. And the danger is that if a person doesn't take care of his religion, he could leave his religion and therefore be one of the losers, be one of those who lose and have no place in Jannah and who have no place to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Akhirah. And this is what some of the wise Salaf mentioned about those who were before us, those who were given the deen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the Ahlul Kitab, the people of scripture. They eventually left their religion. But we need to remember that they didn't leave the religion of the truth overnight. It didn't just happen in a flash. It happened by them going further and further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until they took off their religion like a person takes off a shirt. And this is what some of the Salaf said, that the Bani Israel did not leave their religion in a day. Rather, insalakhu minha, they took it off. They slid out of it, as a person takes off a shirt from his back. Slowly, slowly, one arm, another arm, the head, and the shirt slides off. And in this way, the Bani Israel left their religion. They did something to disobey Allah. They went against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in other things. They didn't turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they went wrong. And so slowly but surely, they left the religion entirely. And so a Muslim should be careful and should practice what the ulama, what the scholars mentioned. Because of all of this, they said that a Muslim should practice ta'ahud al-Iman, or taking care of a person's faith, trying to preserve it and trying to maintain it. So this reality was understood by the best of the people, the Sahaba, the companions themselves, who were the best of the Ummah, and whose Iman, whose faith and whose Iman was the strongest and best. They themselves used to fear losing or having their Iman weakened. And they used to know that if a person does not take care of his Iman, then the person might lose that. And so they used to also be very enthusiastic and very concerned to try to increase their Iman whenever they could. And so, for example, it is related from Amir al-Mu'mineen Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He used to say, and who is Umar? Umar, from the best of the people, whose strength of Iman is famous, is known. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam bore witness to his superiority in the religion, such that after Abu Bakr, Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is the greatest of the believers, the greatest of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he is from the greatest of the people after the prophets and messengers themselves. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, he used to say to his companions, to those of his friends and those who were around him, he would invite them and say, هَلُمُّ نَزْدَادُ إِيمَانًا. So he would say and invite his friends, come, let us increase in Iman. Let us go and do something that would increase us in Iman. And likewise, the great companion and scholar, from the Imams of the scholars amongst the noble companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to say, Ijlisu bina nazdadu imana. Sit with us for a while, let us increase in Iman. And he used to make a dua. He used to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He used to say, Allahumma zidni imanan wa yaqinan wa fiqha. Oh Allah, increase me in Iman and certainty, yaqeen, and fiqh, understanding of your religion. And likewise from the Imams of the companions, from the great scholars amongst the companions, Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he also used to say to his friends and to his companions, Ijlisu bina nu'min sa'ah. Sit with us, let us believe, meaning let us believe more for an hour, for a time. And likewise, from the great companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiyallahu anhu, he used to take the hand of, he used to take his friends, his companions, his students, he used to take them by the hands, and he used to say, Ta'alaw nu'min sa'a. Come, let us believe for an hour. Ta'alaw falnadhkur billah wa nazdud imanan bita'atih. Come, let us remember Allah and increase in our Iman by obeying Him through His obedience. لَأَلَّهُ يَذْكُرْنَا بِمَغْفِرَتِهِ. Perhaps Allah then, or we hope that Allah then will mention us through His forgiveness. And likewise from the Imams of the righteous companions, from amongst those who are known for his righteousness and his devoutness, the great companion Abu Darda, Uwaymir al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu, he used to say, Al-Imanu yazdadu wa yanqus. It is reported from him that he would say, faith, Iman, increases and decreases. And this is also reported from a number of people, a number of the companions, although some of those narrations are not authentic from them. Some of those that have preceded, like that, which we mentioned from Umar, and those, and Ibn Mas'ud and others, have also been mentioned as being authentic from them by the scholars. Also it is related that Abu Darda rahimahullah used to say, min fiqh al-abd an ya'lama muzdadun huwa aw muntaqis, wa inna min fiqh al-abd an ya'lama nuzghat al-shaytan anna ta'tih. It is from the fiqh, it is from the understanding of a man, it is from the intelligence and understanding of a person, of a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he should know, he should recognize if he's getting more of good and Iman, or if he's getting less. Is he increasing in his Iman, or is he decreasing and deteriorating? And it is from the understanding and intelligence, good understanding of a person, that he should know the prodding of shaitan, the tricks and the plots of shaitan, where they come from, where do they approach him from. This is from the fiqh, this is from the real meaning of understanding the religion and understanding oneself, that we should try to ponder and understand in our daily lives, in our goings and comings. Are we increasing in good, or are we losing good? Are we increasing our faith, or are we deteriorating when we do certain things? And it is from it is from the intelligence of a person and from the good understanding to know about where the tricks and plots and attacks of shaitan come from. It is also related from the great companion Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that he said, Al-Imanu yazdadu wa yanqus. Iman increases and decreases. And this, the authenticity of this has been discussed by some of the ulama. But the point is that from these great examples of the most senior of the companions in their knowledge and in their virtue, in their companionship of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they all had this idea and they all understood this well, that a person's Iman needs to be taken care of and needs to be protected, and we need to do things in order to develop, or in order to preserve and further develop our faith and to protect it against deterioration and decrease. So the question then is, what are some of the ways that a person can increase in Iman? Well, the ulama have listed a number of ways based upon what is in the Quran, the Book of Allah, and the Sunnah of His Messenger alayhi salatu wassalam, and we want to list some of those such that those who are listening from the sisters and anyone who's listening from the brothers online in this conference, that we can check and we can list for ourselves some of the things that we can do practically to keep our Iman strong bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and to protect it against deterioration and decrease. So the first of them is beneficial knowledge. Al-ilm al-nafi', to busy yourself and to seek beneficial knowledge. And this includes, first and foremost, being close with the Quran, reciting the Quran and learning it and trying to understand it and then act upon it. And this beneficial knowledge includes knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His names and attributes, His beautiful names and His lofty attributes, His asma'i wa sifat. Beneficial knowledge includes learning about and pondering over and remembering the seerah, the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best example of Iman and Taqwa. And likewise it includes learning about and remembering the lives of the Salaf, of the pious predecessors, their sayings and their actions, and the things and how they lived Iman, and how they practiced it and how they died upon it bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It includes learning about and remembering the beautiful aspects of this religion, the benefits and the beautiful qualities of the religion of Islam. Because when a person remembers and learns how beautiful the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and how beneficial it is for us in this world as well as the hereafter, then a person, his Iman increases, his adherence to the religion and his thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Iman, they increase and they are preserved. Likewise, from those things that help a person to increase his Iman after knowledge is to try to do as many sincere deeds as possible, sincere acts of worship, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfill one's obligations and do more than the obligations if we can, sincerely hoping for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This itself increases a person's Iman. And it also includes, or one of the ways of increasing a person's Iman is to keep good company. And this is one of the most effective ways of increasing a person's Iman or preserving a person's Iman, is to keep in the company of the believers, of righteous people. So these are 3 or 4 main reasons and causes for a person's faith to be preserved and to increase and to be protected. And each of these deserves, especially the first few that we mentioned, they deserve really lectures and classes to really talk about them. But suffice it to say that we know from what we've been studying, and we know from what we've heard and what we read in the book and the Sunnah, and what we've heard from the ulama, that knowledge is one of the most important ways to tread the path to Jannah bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And that knowledge of the religion and of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, knowledge of Allah and knowledge about His Messenger Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam, and knowledge about Islam itself is not only an obligation, but is also something that the more you study of, the stronger your Iman becomes. And as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah mentioned about knowledge, summarizing its importance, he mentions that knowledge is at the basis of all of these things. That every action that a person does that could be of benefit, then the basis for that has to be knowledge, correct knowledge. And thereafter a person's deeds based upon this correct knowledge, they're the things that are the things that are acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he mentions an important point. He says that any knowledge or action which does not increase your Iman, then there is something wrong with that. There is something wrong, there is a deficiency or a defect in that knowledge or that action. Because righteous, correct knowledge, beneficial knowledge and righteous action is supposed to strengthen and help a person's Iman, and it is not something which causes it to waver or to weaken. So knowledge is at the basis of all of these things, and we said the different abwab, the different aspects of knowledge, the different parts of knowledge and areas that a person should be busy in studying and knowing is first the very basis of knowledge and the best of all speech, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to recite the Quran and to understand it and to know its meanings so that you can act by it. We know, and we do not need here to go into great detail, but we know that the Quran is the best of all speech, and it is the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed for our guidance, for us to benefit and for us to know Him better. And the asl, it is the root, or it is the basis for all other types of beneficial knowledge about knowing Islam, knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The basis of all of these things is to know the Quran, to know the words of Allah, within which is our guidance, how we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how we know our deen, and how we know what benefits us. So the Quran contains knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that a person can know his Lord, know the purpose for his existence, meaning why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create us and for what purpose, and so that person can then go on and try to fulfill that purpose. And in the Quran is the deen of Islam and what we are supposed to do in order to fulfill that purpose, what Allah has commanded and what He has forbidden. And in the Quran is the best explanation and the best examples of the reward and the benefits and the promise that awaits those who do fulfill that purpose of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obeying Him alone. And in the Quran is the best explanation and the best description of what awaits those who go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who disobey Him, who don't worship Him alone, or who associate partners with Him, or who reject His deen and do not submit to Him. So in all of these matters, the Quran is the basis of beneficial knowledge. So the advice, to finish, because we have a very short time slot, the advice is that a person should look after his Iman and should be concerned and not complacent about the religion that he has been guided to and that he has been blessed with, or she has been blessed with by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam told us, that this Iman, this faith, can sometimes get worn out, it can wear out, it can become weaker. And in order to renew it, we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to renew it and to keep it strong within our hearts. And then we have to seek the means and do those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided us to and has given us, those causes and those asbab, those means and those instruments that help us to strengthen our Iman and save us from having our Iman weakened or deteriorated. Some of those things we listed, and though each of those topics are topics for the sisters and for those who are listening to go further into and to study further, it is like a program or like a curriculum that we can study and that we can try to spend some time finding out more about. And with that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, I will end today's small kalima, small speech, in anticipation for the next talk. أقول هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المؤمنين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.